Whether you're a fan of multiplayer games or single-player games, it's very likely you've tried your hand at live service titles in the past, and it certainly won't have escaped your attention that numerous titles in recent weeks and recent months have dramatically failed. This then brings up a rather interesting question. Why is it that Elite Dangerous manages to keep on going despite other games with significantly more funding are falling down left, right and centre? Well, there are numerous reasons for that, and we're going to look at those in this video. Now, the game has been around for close to a decade at this point, and during that time has managed to maintain a steady player base, and that's despite facing significant obstacles such as Odyssey, one of its major expansions, which was, yes, a spectacular failure, but Frontier have managed to hold the ship together. Now, what sets Elite Dangerous apart from other live service titles? Why has it continued to succeed during this time period, whilst other games, ones which with significantly more money, have indeed failed? Well, surprise, surprise, this all comes down to the nature of live service titles themselves. The market has become overbloated and oversaturated as developers and publishers alike chase the next big thing. We saw this happen in the past with World of Warcraft. It arrived on the market in a massive storm, hit massive success, and then everyone and their aunt wanted to make a clone of that game. They all wanted to jump on the MMORPG bandwagon. And unfortunately, the same has now happened with the live service bandwagon. Yeah, there is another bandwagon there trundling along, and the wheels seem to be falling off. Although quite naturally it should be pointed out that the heavy hitters that have been around for a very long time, the likes of Fortnite and Counter-Strike, are still working very, very well. It's the games that are generally speaking new arrivals and trying to fit into a crowded market that really are having a problem. And this is where it seems titles like Elite Dangerous really do stand out. So let's take a look at a few of those reasons why Elite does indeed stand out in this crowded market. Let's start with the fact that it is a niche title. Many of the people jumping on the live service bandwagon are looking for massive volumes of player numbers. Frontier never sought that with Elite. In fact, it would be highly unlikely they could ever achieve that. Instead, they focused on what they knew would work. A space game set within a vast universe upon which players could have at least a semblance of impact. It's a premise that won't attract the numbers of Fortnite, but nonetheless it's also a premise that has maintained a decent number of players over the years. In fact, somewhat ironically, the largest misstep that Frontier made regarding Elite Dangerous was the release of Odyssey, which they seemingly aimed at the larger crowd, trying to attract in the FPS crowd. And it should have been obvious really to anyone that the FPS crowd are not going to be interested in a niche space game. Unfortunately, it was a misstep which did negatively impact the reputation of Elite for a lot of the players, and it's something which has taken Frontier a very long time to recover from. But nonetheless, here we are today in 2023, and in general, from what we can see of player numbers at least, they seem to be remaining steady. The first lesson that Elite Dangerous teaches the live service market then here is know your niche and stick to your market. Moving on to a really big issue for live service titles is of course the subject, the gritter in the room, monetization. Macrotransactions in some cases are a really big deal and a significant turnoff for many players. Now, despite games like Fortnite raking in billions of dollars from microtransactions, not every single live service game is going to be able to do that. However, that doesn't stop publishers and developers from trying. Numerous games over recent years have put in some really nasty and predatory microtransactions in the form of unsavory loot boxes and other problematic ideas, essentially trying to take every little penny that the players have, milk them for everything they're worth in short. Now, in almost every single case, this has massively backfired for the games in question. Elite Dangerous, meanwhile, takes a slightly different approach, and this one is generally a little easier on the players. What Elite does is monetize cosmetics, colorations for your ship, for your equipment, for your spacesuits, and all that lovely stuff. This is in direct opposition to the idea of monetizing gameplay and incentivizing purchasing things through grindy and difficult gameplay. This is a form of monetization that Frontier have always avoided with Elite Dangerous. despite what could quite easily be seen as the temptations to jump into that. But of course, this means that Elite Dangerous doesn't rake in billions of dollars, it doesn't rake in hundreds of millions of dollars, and likely also doesn't rake in tens of millions of dollars every single year. The big heavy hitters can do this, they have a different target market, but also they are an overcrowded and oversaturated market. So this particular lesson ties into the first, know your niche. Second, don't squeeze that niche, that market, for every penny that it's worth. Show some respect, and likely players will make the purchase. Moving on to gameplay. This, specifically for me personally, is an area where I have really big issues when it comes to live service titles. Live service games, by their very nature, tend to be grindy. Now, some people within the gaming communities, specifically I've seen this in the Elite Dangerous community a lot, will tell you that the idea of grindy gameplay is a state of mind. Whilst it's true that grindy gameplay can be a state of mind, it is a fact that objectively grindy gameplay does exist, and this is backed up by Frontier themselves, as you can see in forum posts. They talk here, for example, about the engineer grind, something that they felt need to be alleviated, and they were going to jump into at some point and try and fix, but unfortunately they have never gotten around to that. But that said, they have shown an awareness that their game can be grindy, and over the years have shown a willingness to alleviate that grind. Grind then is a very problematic issue when it comes to live service titles. By their very nature, they are filled with it. Take Warframe for example. This is a highly respected title, a highly respected game, a well-loved live service title, but it is full of tons and tons of grindy, repetitive gameplay through which players have to partake in repetitive game loops just to unlock specific content. This subject actually ties into a broader subject that I'd like to talk about in the future, a bit too large for this particular video, and that is the very nature of the change in gameplay ideas. The idea that games have moved away from skill towards, repetitive, grindy gameplay to achieve unlocks. The massive success of titles such as Elden Ring really do highlight that players still drive and strive for skill-based gameplay. But that's just not the nature of live service games. Their focus is far narrower. So with that in mind, has Elite done something right here where other titles have gone wrong? This one is a little trickier to answer. Elite, unfortunately, is known as an extremely grindy game. It takes an immense amount of time to work through the engineer's process, the process by which you improve your spaceships. Equally, the process to improve and unlock a variety of different upgrades for your spacesuits down on services in Odyssey is equally as challenging and equally as overwhelming. It's an area where the game just doesn't excel at. But again, Frontier have done something right here by limiting and focusing that particular grind-based gameplay. When we step back and look at other live service titles, we can see they are full of battle passes, multiple seasons worth of unlocks, and unending new content. You can just never reach the end. This is where Frontier get things right by simply limiting Elite's focus. Frontier here could have opted for battle pass style systems and other similar things. They could have gone for unending unlocks where every few months they release something new. Warframe comes to mind, but as do many other games out there. In short then, Elite Dangerous may be grindy, but its focus is, pretty much laser focused. Overall then, I do feel that Frontier have done a pretty good job when it comes to maintaining a live service title. They know their niche and have managed to maintain the current players. Player retention when it comes to live service games is largely what it's all about. In fact, players who stick around for a prolonged time are much more likely to spend money on your game. That doesn't mean that Frontier have got things down pat and that everything is good. Elite Dangerous still faces some potential challenges along the way, one of the most significant of which, in my personal opinion, is content. Now, content has always been a sticky issue when it comes to Elite Dangerous. With live service games, players generally expect a rapid delivery of brand new content and want to see it at a regular cadence. What's more, not only do players want to see the new content releases, they also want to hear about what's coming next. Some live service games, for example the Microsoft Flight Simulator, are exceptional at delivering their roadmaps. At any given moment, players know what the next update is, and they also have a broad outline of what to expect for the coming year. Elite Dangerous, by contrast, merely lets players know that there are future updates. For example, in this case, Update 15 is coming at the end of April, and Update 16 is coming later in the year. But beyond that, Frontier revealed absolutely no information whatsoever. In comparison to the broader live service industry, the live service genre, this really is an extremely unusual way to manage things. That said, over the recent year or so, Frontier have made some improvements here, with some semi-regular content releases and their ongoing Thargoid narrative, which is what the developers term their curated content releases, their curated story. Ultimately then, Elite Dangerous does seem to have a release schedule, but I do see this as a potential massive challenge for the years and times ahead for Elite. The game then does manage to stand out amongst a oversaturated and overbloated market. The live service games industry is in what I would term as a bit of a mess. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of good games out there, but generally the good ones are the heavy hitters, and the market is being swamped by a lot of copycats and a lot of clones that are just trying to over-monetize and, well, over-grind, make players play for nothing. It's far from what a game should be. Ultimately then, there's a very strong case to be made that Elite Dangerous is certainly a good live service title. That of course brings us on to another entirely related subject. Is Elite a good game? It might be a good live service title, but is it a good or is it a bad game? This is a broader subject and something I'd like to discuss in a future video. Meanwhile, do let me know your thoughts and feelings about Elite as a live service title in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.